connection directly with the applicants, you know.
It's not part of the process.
It isn't really, and once it gets to you, that is what you're looking at, not the alternative, as much as you might want to. You know, once it's because we often do get that. We say to ourselves, sort of thinking aloud, almost on planning. Well, why couldn't that be in another place? For example, the siting here could have been different, and it would have been better for the neighbours, but maybe not so good for the town. And you know, there are always variations on these things. But once you get it, that's it.
You've got to decide
that's what you're looking at.
What's in front of you. Yeah, no, I understand. So, just finishing off on this, the supplementary planning guidance. As I understand it, it is in the queue to be looked at by the forward planning.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear. It's certainly we've banged on about it enough and said we want it.
I think the way they were talking about it was that it might be an intensive farming guidance, which might wrap up a renewal of the polytunnels.
Right. Oh, well, that would actually make a certain amount of sense to combine some of those things. Obviously, animals are different.
I mean, obviously the trouble is I think they're not going to get round to it for quite some time, and then it would take some time with consultation and everything. So.
We might try another motion, and Anthony and I have been trying to have a meeting with Philip Price, who's the cabinet member, to try and nail it down, and he did say he would meet us and we'd talk it through, but it just hasn't happened yet. But anyway, we'll do what we can and sort of keep pushing for it.
But that would be useful from the committee's point of view.
Very, yeah, it would.
Because again, I was following up on the minerals and waste plan, which you mentioned, which I believe is as you say, is ahead in the queue.
it is coming along, but it's been a hell of a long time. Yes,
but from what I understand, it would only cover a part of.
Well. Exactly. I mean, we don't think, and we've said it, because there's a group of us on Task and Finish, only 4 or 5 of us, but, you know, at each meeting we've said this actually isn't going to do the job that we think that you need the planning guidance for. You know, that was the excuse for not having it, but actually there's not really any way that this particular policy can cover that. It can cover elements of the waste side of it.
Yes, lump the manure. Disposal, spreading, etc.
But you need a separate pay policy thing, really. Okay. So we'll keep pushing on that one, certainly.
And just to bring it down to very local levels, do you feel that the neighbourhood plans, you know, to what extent they might make a difference when to the consideration of planning applications in future?
I think it's really too early to say. I mean, at best they should and could, and I think we're hopeful they will at least have some effect. But this, you know, quite a few of them have gone through now. But I don't think there's been a sort of point at which we've been able to actually say the neighbourhood plan made the difference. Certainly not on anything to do with farming, poultry houses. But even on anything else, actually, not really. I mean, we've locally tried to use it in its early stages, because ours hasn't gone through yet. We've had so many hold-ups and setbacks and problems trying to get the Leinster one through. It's at Reg 16, and it's with the inspector or whatever he is who looks at it. But it endlessly keeps coming back, and we keep being told there's something else that's got to be sorted. But it was at Reg 16, which is supposed to have some bearing, even if it's not, you know, adopted. And it certainly didn't help with the chicken house on Eaton Hill, on the side of Eaton.
So is there something in the Leinster?
I can't remember the exact words. There's certainly words to the effect that discourage anything that's going to have an impact. I can't remember if it actually says. I think it must say something about livestock units or farming practices or something. I can't remember the words, I'm afraid. It's been going so long. I can probably lost the will to live over it. But
I can probably find that.
Yeah, it's easy to access. Yes, sorry, I should be able to say that more positively. But I mean, part of the problem with the area, with the neighbourhood plans, is they have to conform, as you know, to the core strategy, and that has, over the last 4 years we've been at it, you know, one by one excluded all sorts of things we've actually wanted to have in there, but they haven't been allowed, or you know, we've had to have in there. For example, the number of houses, we couldn't argue with that, and there've been other things we've had to sort of, it's had to conform, basically. We can't have anything that's going to be challenging or at odds with the core strategy. That's the big
I just wonder,
with them.
because there's so little in the core strategy about intensive farming, does that
when it was
open an opportunity for the neighbourhood plans to say more? I mean,
it could do, I suppose. Yes, it could. I mean, perhaps you're right on that one. I really can't remember. It's been going so long, and it's an awfully long time since I looked at the detail of ours, I'm afraid, except in very specific terms, when we were trying to protect the gateway to Leominster and stop a rather nice piece of green field being built on, and we had a policy about protecting the green spaces round the town, which apparently didn't have any weight at all when it came to
Eaton Hill.
Well, Eaton Hill is precious. I mean, we shouldn't be doing anything on Eaton Hill. Yeah, so it's I would say mixed. There may be cases where it'll be very, very helpful indeed. I'm sure it will, but certainly not in every instance. And on something like this, I'm not sure it will be.
That's
I mean, I don't think, for example, we would have been able to have an exclusion clause, something like no factory farms within 5 mile radius or something like that.
I have talked to one parish council that's been going through the process and sort of had a look at how they're doing their neighbourhood plan with a view to restricting the number of livestock units, and so I'll follow that up in at least one or two locations.
Yeah.
So I'll have a look at that. Coming on to the sort of the planning application process rather than just the policy framework. There's obviously a whole range of statutory consultees that are asked to comment on all the applications. And there's all these different issues which you mentioned at the beginning, the landscape issues, traffic, noise, pollution and so on. Maybe we could just go through a few of those and take a few issues at each stage. I mean, the landscape side of things, there seems to be quite an emphasis on, well, if they're screened, then that is all okay then. Paraphrasing very greatly. But there's a huge emphasis on let's just plant lots of trees and screening and so on. And the landscape sort of assessment and officers' comments are only occasionally very robust. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Right. Again, it is an amazingly mixed picture. Is the impression I get. I mean, there are some applications which come our way where there's enormous care seems to be taken to place the poultry houses in a fold of the hills or whatever it is to try and minimise the impact. And then in others, you think, well, have they even thought about it almost, So it really does vary enormously. The planting obviously will help, but then you wonder who are they, where is the landscape impact being, where is the focus? Is it from the main road going by? Is it from the footpaths that crisscross the area? Is it from the very local residents? The picture is very varied, and I'm sure that makes it very difficult to do. But I don't get a terribly clear picture. All I do seem to see is that there are quite different approaches to that. Whether that's a response to the local response to the feeling that there clearly is in some cases. Some of them people don't seem that bothered. I suppose if they're tucked away and there's very few houses, then it's perhaps not a great deal of concern about them.
The landscape does come in. I mean, Beige Court, for example, was turned down on landscape and those have held. But that seems to be relatively rare.
It is rare, and I mean, the one that comes to mind is the one up at in the Golden Valley in Philip Price's area, which was very contentious because it was actually recommended for refusal. Who's the planning officer? What's his name? Blondish chap.
Was that Ed Thomas?
No, it wasn't Ed Thomas. I can't remember his name now. He's very tall and quite tall and fairish, and I think he's the one who's got a stutter. Anyway, he'd done a very, very thorough report, and certainly the way it was placed was, quite